Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
Well, COVID struck the Martini household, so
I gave it to you vicariously through Zoom, like I got it last week, you got it this week.
I was due for it, man. I escaped it all these years. Neither Rosie nor myself had it, so you've had it 3 times, so somehow we got lucky, but I guess it all catches up to us in the end.
Yeah, man. Yeah, well, happy you were feeling a little bit better. Hopefully you're on the mend, and hopefully everyone listening is, doing okay.
Yeah. Good enough to pod. I'm good enough to pod.
Yes.
It's all that counts.
That's good. That's all that matters, yes.
Well, what are we doing, Chris? What's going on today?
All right, well, today we are, wrapping up our Chris Hauty month. So we have already done Deep State, Savage Road, and Storm Rising. If you haven't listened to those, go and check out those pods. They're on this feed. If you haven't read those, I don't know where you've been, but you should go read them. Yeah, and today we got a little treat for you. It's a little novella by Chris Hauty. Sort of places itself right in between Savage Road, and I guess we pick up right at the end of Savage Road, and we get some hints about Insurrection Day. And so this is a Kindle-only edition, so you can only read it on Kindle. And you actually, if you haven't read Storm Rising, it came with I think the first chapter of Storm Rising at the very end. So yeah, it's a nice, 120-page read. Pretty good. Before we get into that, let's give them a little bit of an update about what we're doing. We have a busy month. If we weren't already busy, we're about to get even more busy. So why don't you tell them about the summer, Mike?
Yeah, it's coming. We've got so much planned on this podcast. Well, we are moving forward in June and July on this feed, the Thriller Podcast, to cover Jack Carr. Every one of Jack Carr's books, starting with The Terminalist, and that will get us ready for the TV show. And we have a little bit of a lineup to bring on some guests, different people you might have heard on the Mitch Rap podcast. They're going to join us a second time, and we are going to kick off the Jack Carr podcast in June and July. We're going to do all the books and the TV show. While we're doing that, we also are going to keep the Scott Harvath podcast rolling. We've got State of the Union coming to you this month in June. I've really enjoyed this one, Chris. So it's only our
really good.
Yeah, it's only
really
our
good.
third Harvath book, but I'm just calling it. I think it's going to remain top 5, absolutely top 10. It's a good one.
Okay. All right.
So,
Above lines?
I'm going to have to use the scorecard and try to parse that one apart because it's close, but I don't know if it reaches that high.
It's definitely above Path. So, for sure.
Yeah. But we'll save all that for the Scott Harvath podcast.
Yes, this is not that pod.
This is not it. You mentioned it. We are getting into Insurrection Day. I think this, for being a novella, might just be Chris Hauty's best written piece. I love it. I was blown away by it.
Wow. It's very good. I still think Deep State is better, but it is very good. It's very gripping. I like how, we can just kick it off. Like, I like how it puts you right into the action. It's just a full tour de force boom. Essentially like distilling. I can see where you're coming from because it's kind of like distilling everything he's good at.
Yes,
this
exactly.
idea of just propulsive action and like the way he writes. Like, it's just these quick little chapters, and every single little chapter has a cliffhanger ending. We get a twist, of course, right in the middle of the novella. And, something that I had, I'm not big into historical fiction. And so I would classify this as, maybe a subgenre of historical fiction, taking an actual event and then placing your character in it and then, sort of having an alternative history of it. Very, very interesting. And I feel like he weaves in, a lot of the dialogue, post what actually happened on the Capitol building, January 6th, into the story very well. I liked, dropping, and he toes the line going back and forth. I feel like this could be a little bit, especially like based on a lot of the readers who read these kind of novels, it kind of a big step. Or kind of
it's bold. It's bold.
A bold step. Yeah. Like to do this. In the end, he makes Russia the enemy, so I guess he saves himself there, like before he really piss somebody off, like piss a lot of people off. But he's shown that he doesn't really care. Like he's going to play it both ways. He did that same thing in Rising Tiger, Storm Rising, with the whole abortion plotline. So yeah, I think he's not afraid to do anything, and it definitely shows in this novella.
I think he calls it as he sees it, and I applaud him for that.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, you could have really done a lot of dancing, tried to find both sides, if you will, but I think Chris clearly describes the mob and their motivations and their ties to white supremacy groups very clearly, is upfront about it, and the way Hayley has to navigate that, and then all the different players, not only her navigating it, but even the Capitol Police themselves, some of them are implicated. And then different people in the Congress, some of them in the speeches they're given on the floor are kind of in line with this mob. So yeah, I think he's very bold, jumps right into it, calls it as he sees it, and wanted to accurately recount what happened on that day without necessarily playing politics about it.
Right.
But before we get into it, I like to share my thoughts on this book in the form of a limerick. There once was a riot on January 6th. With insurrectionists Russians had mixed. The howling mob, what a beast. As she assists Capitol Police, a massive loss of intel she's fixed.
Nice. So on Goodreads and Amazon has 4.3 Goodreads, 4.03 on Goodreads, 4.3 on Amazon. The nationally best-selling twisty, electrifying Hayley Chill series continues with this novella following the former Washington, D.C. intern as she faces a violent uprising at the United States Capitol. During the course of one terrifying and chaotic day, nativist forces stage a violent uprising by storming the Capitol. Authorities are unprepared to protect the nation's elected representatives as the country's citadel of democracy is breached in what appears to be a spontaneous insurrection. Hayley Chill, in the building for other business, does what she can to rescue a powerful senator and his staff. But in doing so, she discovers shocking evidence that the uprising had its beginnings with one of the country's long-standing overseas enemies. With no one else to trust, Hayley must prevent as many deaths as possible while also chasing down foreign operatives across the city before they abscond with what she understands to be critical national intelligence. Yeah, so right from the bat, she goes to the Capitol building to see her friend, right? She's walking, before she gets to the Capitol building, she witnesses like almost the near death of this black or dark skin colored physician at GW Hospital. Knows that she's like, what the hell's going on? This is not good. Like, and then as she progresses along, she sees more and more of these people who are decked out in alt-right memorabilia or regalia, Confederate flags, Gadsden flags, Confederate uniforms. And then she sees a bunch of United States flags. And I like how she, because she obviously works for Publius, whose ultimate job is to uphold the Constitution, uphold what that flag means. And it hurts her to see like this flag being used in such a way. Mm-hmm. And I think like little lines show up throughout the series. And I particularly like the one chapter, and we haven't mentioned this before about Hauty, how he not only titles his chapters just, numbers, but he gives like a little couple words that tie directly into what the chapter, like something, that word is going to show up in the chapter, right? Or that, like, one of the ones I really liked was eat, kill, fuck, sleep. And that's like a motto that Russian Spetsnaz like have. Yeah. But there was this other one where like the storm saved the day. And yes. In that chapter, it talks about like the last time the Capitol was breached and the White House was burned down, right, and everything.
The War of 1812, yeah.
Right. I like, sort of bringing that into some historical context about how, people have breached this. And like the graffiti in the elevators. And yeah, no, I like sort of the interplaying, obviously, real events. And I went and looked up, and like some of the things that he puts in are directly, reported and what was seen from the actual day.
Right.
And then interlaced with that, you have, sort of this narrative, this fictional narrative. Yeah. So what did you think about sort of the beginning of this novel, getting into the violence, getting into the beginning of the insurrection?
Well, first off, you're right in pointing those details out because they make it so meaningful and so real. And that cues you in that Chris is going to tell this story in his own way, but he's going to get a lot of things right. And another move he makes, even before the action starts, is the dedication. And I knew we were in for a real, meaningful, well-crafted, thoughtful story when I saw this. For the U.S. Capitol Police officers, Brian Sicknick, Howard Liebengood, Jeffrey Smith, Kyle DeFreytag, and Gunther Hashida. Obviously, the officers who lost their lives on January 6th, and I thought that was extraordinarily tasteful to kick it off. And then another quote, which also kind of cues you in to Chris's philosophy and why he told this story, is an epigraph, a quote from John Adams. A government of laws and not of men. And I just think that's an important statement because often a mob is riled up because of a cult of personality. And when we put all of our faith, trust, and blind belief into a person and not into the principles of the Constitution that withstood the test of time and the true exercise of liberty, justice, freedom, and equality, we put all of our trust in a man, we could be manipulated quite easily. And that's, I think, what the mob is happening to the mob here. And I think that's what Chris wants to warn us against with the story. So I really like that quote from John Adams, a government of laws and not of men. All that before we jump into the action, before Hayley snaps off the radio antenna of an old jalopy, a 1966, what was it, a Coronet or something, and starts beating these three dudes. And literally... he writes
slices
the face
open, right?
Right. He says which parts of the face and the skull she's lacerating with this radio antenna off a beaten up car. Just, it's brilliant, dude. It's absolutely brilliant. It's so Hayley chill.
And then once she gets into the Capitol, she, with her lanyard, like her visitor lanyard, she uses to like garrote a dude in order to like get out. The action is just amazing. Like one thing after another, we get her, not only her dealing with, those two people at different points, dealing with different bad actors. That one MCP police officer who actually is, like, we get that quick turn where he's like, wait, what tells you that I'm not with them? And he's actually an insurrectionist. And then ultimately her interactions with the Russians, and the action is just nonstop once we hear those Russian words. I don't know. I love that we're never too far away from action in this little novella.
You're so right. And speaking of characters, you mentioned that police officer. I think what makes the action so intense is that the mob is a character.
Right. It is.
I feel like the mob is being described as the villain. It's not an individual or a small group of people. The villain that could tear down our institutions physically and figuratively is a mob mentality, right? Without reason, without logic, just based on pure emotion and misguidedness. And I don't know about you, but some of the language he uses to describe the mob's movements makes me think of like a mythical creature. It's almost complete and utter destruction without any sort of care or nuance or deliberation. And just listen to how all this is described when he writes, quote, "The mob is a howling beast with 10,000 heads, melded by rage and acting as one, incited by rumor and innuendo. The colossus battles anyone who stands in its path. Anything that dares defy it, the monster lays siege to the building." Are you getting references of like a classical mythology, almost like a kraken? I'm thinking like the mob is like a kraken.
Right, or like a dragon descending on a castle,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's great writing. I love that.
No, and I like how, like you said, the mob is the character, and he doesn't go too far into like describing too many single individuals. Like there's a general description of like what everyone is, what everyone's addressing. He picks out like a few characters that obviously get directly in Hayley's way, and she's able to quickly take them out. But it's this collective. It's like the fever vibing off of everybody that is like, allowing them to penetrate in. And just the ineptitude of like the police officers there and how no one is ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just holding court in the middle of the Senate, probably because they don't think anything like this would happen. But just the fact and the nonchalance by not only
the sergeant at arms,
but also by, the senator, by her friend who gets her in.
Yeah.
Like a little bit of incompetence there, obviously, not being ready for this. And I remember she mentions, and I meant to go look this up, but she's like, who the hell is the park police officer who gave them the permit to,
right,
to do this protest? What was there actually a permit for the original protest? But yeah, that was interesting.
And speaking of the mob being so unruly, she outsmarts it. And this reminded me, at least, do you remember that story? And there was that video clip of that one police officer being chased down by the mob, like in the rotunda or in the halls of the Capitol. And he looks one way and notices it's the corridor that would lead you to the vice presidential suite. And he purposefully walks
which is exactly
backwards.
Where she's at.
Yeah, he draws the mob up past him and tries to rile them up to follow him. And he completely diverts them away from the important people. Hayley's kind of doing that here. With just a little bit of wits, she tells the mob, oh, it's that way. And, it's really the other way. Or the way they're moving from the Senate office to try to get down to the tunnel. She's being very cunning. So, again, it's just not that kick-ass, take names, whip people with an antenna from a car, or use your lanyard to choke someone out. She's doing all that, but she also realizes how you defeat the stupidity of the mob is by using reason. And so she kind of outwits them as well.
Yeah, and I guess to couple with that, I like how he always weaves in this idea that other operators can see Hayley and know that she's not normal, that she is an operator.
Yes, Gomes.
We get that not only with the Spetsnaz, but also with Officer Wilson, who unfortunately passes away. But he can tell, like right from the bat, that this is not just some White House aide. She, is like him in a sense. Yeah, and we get this interaction in the senator's office, and sort of this is our MacGuffin or whatever that propels the rest of the story. Like now, Hayley's able to successfully get him and the aides out, but he needs that briefcase, and she thinks it's because it holds like all this, incriminating evidence for not incriminating, but state secrets,
intelligence,
right? Intelligence, especially because he is, the lion of the Senate, right? Or
he's the majority leader, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's been hardlining on Russia. So she thinks maybe he has something like that we're going to do, and that the Russians would specifically want. I don't know if we want to talk about this here, but in the end, that end scene where we find out that it actually had nothing to do with that, just made me so mad.
Yeah,
like maybe, and it was freaking scandalous photos with his girlfriend that he really cared about. That's I love. We're on this pod. We're a huge fan of when the politicians are the bad guys.
Yeah,
and this is just amazing. Like that. Of course, that's what he wanted it for.
I hated it. Right, I hated it because Officer Wilson Gomes gave his life, and that dude was fantastic. So I hated it. But at the same time, it worked so well as a Hauty twist because it just kind of twists the knife of all these politicians just suck, and they'll all just use people as cannon fodder and bait to get whatever they want. And he only wanted the briefcase saved because of his girlfriend's nude pictures. It's like, come, for a scandal?
Some dick pics. Yeah,
and people risk their lives for you? Yeah, so I hated it and I loved it. I thought it was a genius move. Also because I don't think in a novella like this, between books, you could really do a big Hauty twist. It can't be something...
where it's like something else. It had to be something like that.
It can't really affect the storyline, right? Because of how many people will read Savage Road and jump right to Storm Rising and skip this one or miss it. So it really couldn't be that big a bombshell twist. So that was kind of a fun, playful little thing at the end that should tick you off, but it doesn't really affect the story.
But we do get one kind of a Hauty twist, and sort of right in the middle, right as Gomes is right before Gomes dies, Hayley hears some Russian spoken. Finish him off. I guess before we get into the Russian aspect of it and that twist, what did you think of his ability to give us a whole recap of Savage Road, as well as a recap of Deep State, bringing in Hayley's father, little bits and bobs? I thought this was really well executed, especially even better so than from Savage Road, from Deep State to Savage Road, and then even more in Storm Rising. And it was crazy because you have even less words to work with in this novella, but I thought it worked really well, tying everything in. If you hadn't read anything, you could just read this. You know?
Could, absolutely. You could know nothing.
It would be crazy. It still would be crazy.
Yeah.
It still would be crazy, the fact that you're reading the president is a Russian mole, but he did a good job explaining it. I think better than Savage.
Well, I agree, but here's the thing. Savage Road, you had to get the reader up to speed for that storyline, which the president escaping and whatnot, it is the story of that book. So you have a taller task. Where here, you just want to color the background of Hayley a little bit more to whet the appetite. You don't need to rely on the reader having that knowledge. You might just want to drop it, as he very artfully does, basically just to whet the appetite and say, hey, there's more stuff like this in Hayley's background you should check out. So I agree. Executed perfectly. And like you said earlier, actually, in our opening, this is super concentrated Hauty. Everything he does well, everything that puts him at the top of the class as a thriller novelist is being done here in an extremely compacted sense. And so we get just these brilliant moves done with an economy of language, beautifully written, almost poetic at times. And it's so succinct that, like I said earlier, hot take, I think this is his single best piece. It's unfortunate it's only a digital Kindle book. I would go bananas to hear this as an audiobook, particularly read by that first Deep State
by Mira in Ireland
narrator. Yeah. Or even the current one doing Storm Rising. She's also fantastic. To hear one of them narrate this and have a nice, what would it be, an hour, maybe 45-minute
maybe
little mini story, I would almost listen to that like a podcast, once a month. I would keep coming back to it. It's that good.
You could totally do this. I recently listened to Batman Unburied, and it's a Spotify original, like audio, not audio, but it's kind of like a radio show. I'm blanking on the word, but parsed out over the course of 10 episodes, you get this story, and they actually get famous actors to play each part. That would be really cool to turn this into like a narrative audio podcast that's not an audio book, but like actually acted. You get a Hayley Chill, you get
with different actors for each
different
voice.
Actors, to read these voices. I think that would be really cool. And you could do that. You can't do that with a normal book because it's too long.
It's too long, right?
But like this is almost just, you could just straight read it.
That'd be really cool. Yeah, that right there. That's the idea. That's pretty cool. Yeah, but you mentioned the Russians. Yeah, this story kind of pivots. We leave the capital, actually, and I thought that was an exciting action sequence where Hayley's chasing the Russians across the mall, kind of up Pennsylvania Avenue there, into the city. And it's kind of funny how I think one guy she takes down early doesn't have time to really tie him up, right? So she just tells the mob, he's a journalist, knowing...
A Washington Post journalist, yeah.
Knowing they'll start beating him and won't let him go. And she's just doing little things like that are so smart and savvy to keep on the heels of the Russians. And then that culminates in, there's both a shootout on the street, a shootout in a parking garage. So I feel like for all the January 6th stuff, that almost wraps up in the first 30-40% of the book.
Yeah, and I liked how he did that.
Yeah, it almost becomes a typical thriller, right? A Washington, D.C. style action thriller. And it has these two parts. It's almost like a first half and a second half. And I thought that was artfully done because it keeps you in the story.
Right. No, I was going to bring that up too. That the fact that we actually we go farther fully into this new narrative, this new plot line, that he's established with the Russians. Yeah, and we get, a vicious shootout in the parking garage, shootout in front, like almost near the FBI headquarters. And I know we're not in the scorecard yet, Mike, but man, this is a good setting. Like, we're a sucker for DC on this, but he goes because he's having to parse streets and name, markers on each street. And because we're so entrenched with these locations, I'm visualizing everything. I went to school like right there next to the Capitol, right up North Capitol, like 2 blocks away, and I had lunch, and when you're a senior, you can just leave. And I had like double lunch my senior year. So we would just go to like Chinatown. We would go to the National Portrait Gallery. Like, I'm envisioning all these places, and I loved it. It's going to get a 5. Surprise. It's going to be a 5 for setting for me. But yeah, and so it culminates at the Russian embassy.
Right. Since you mentioned the setting, I want to jump in there because I was reading this, and Hayley picks out the bus stop across the street from the Russian embassy, and she's looking down Edmund Street. Dude, I drive past that every day, and I swear, not one day I pass by and don't think of Hayley Chill sitting on that bench, like a silhouette of her, watching this Russian come down the street, getting ready to spring. I almost see her grabbing like the edge of the seat so hard it makes her bleed, saying, blood has been drawn, let the fight begin. Every day when I pass that bus stop. So the setting is absolutely nailed. One other thing about that bus stop, it's across the street from the Russian embassy, and it's directly facing it. The week the war in Ukraine started, you know what somebody had put up across the entire bus stop?
No.
A massive banner right there facing every window of the Russian embassy. Russian warship, go fuck yourself. A huge banner.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Oh, it was sitting there for like a month or 2. It was great.
Yeah. So about this ending, I wanted to ask you if I had to pick some nits, and if I had to, we can be negative sometimes, so I got to go my negative mode. The one negative I had with this was how the final Russian got killed. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's the SVR, at least that's what Andrew Wilde says, it's the SVR that puts a bullet in the head. I really wanted it to be like Publius. I wanted to be like some other Publius, and I wanted the guy to like wink at Hayley, and then for her to know that there's these other operatives besides her and April Wu. She even mentions like there was a bunch of people in Oregon. Are they like lying in wait? I don't know. What did you want it to be, Publius, or are you okay with it being the SVR? Like this whole like there's interplay. The SVR hates the KGBs, and so they didn't like them coming in their backyard and doing this.
Yeah.
All of that tie-in, all of that explanation or exposition just felt forced a little bit.
It did.
When you could have you had to sit right there to have it be Publius. And I know I'm Monday morning quarterbacking, armchair or whatever, but it would have just made more sense to make that a Publius operative.
I was a little disappointed when the van came out of nowhere and just gunned the guy down. Did I buy the excuse it was the Russians? Maybe, but I thought of it more as they didn't want to be seen with their operatives taking advantage of the Capitol situation and walking right up to the front door with stolen documents. I saw it more as an insurance policy to kind of cover themselves. It didn't exactly work. I think that would have been cool. I think what else could have been cool is...
Or just have Hayley kill him.
Well, I think if Hayley was hand-to-hand with the guy, and then somebody comes out of the blue that even she didn't see, like let's say there's just some guy waiting at the bus stop also, or let's say there's a homeless person on the side of the corner, and they just come and start helping her, and they were a deep agent of Publius, currently stationed to watch the Russian embassy.
Right.
And they just start helping each other beat this Russian and then realize they were on the same team. That would have been kind of cool. So yeah, something else could have happened. The van coming out of nowhere and just hitting the dude was like, oh, that's it? So yeah.
Yeah, if I had to go negative on one thing, that would be my loser.
That would be the
just
only
like
one.
And it's fine that he got killed, but just like the fact that it was another Russian,
Yeah.
I feel like they would have killed him, but also taken the duffel bag. You know what I mean?
They would have taken the intel anyway, yeah.
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 But yeah.
I thought it was saved, though, with Andrew Wilde. I love how he takes her to the Lincoln Waffle Shop and goes, "Oh, you
Yeah.
met with Claire Ryan here, the other day." And she's like, "Oh my God. Like, how did you know?" I thought that was pretty cool move.
It's a little more continuation of her uneasiness, like from Savage Road, right?
Exactly.
When she finds out that it was actually April Wu who was sent to, ransack and do recon on her apartment. She still doesn't quite know who these people are that are hiring her, and it's going to be a current theme. We're going to see that continue to play on in Storm Rising. I'm interested to see. We mentioned this a couple of times. We want to see more Publius. We want to dig deeper into. We've got the backstory. We got the little Wikipedia excerpt, but I want the documentary on it. I want the Ed Burns.
Yep.
Like, give me what Publius actually is.
Yeah.
And like we call Publius, but it doesn't actually have a name. It's just that's what some of the operatives are. Andrew Wilde has given it, right? So
the Russian tie-in though had to happen, even if the ending wasn't great. I think it was a great move to ultimately, and this is what she discusses with Andrew Wilde, is to ultimately say who whipped up the mob, who put them in a frenzy, who caused them to storm. It was Russian disinformation.
I like that.
I thought that was a good move to clarify that. And I think that's part of it. I do think a lot of them are brainwashed by certain politicians here on the home front as well, but a big part of it is also the messaging from those politicians is being amplified. Oh, and here's a quote, like Chris does mention this at the end. He says, quote, "Compelling an enemy to defeat itself is as cost-effective, low-risk, offensive strategy that the Kremlin has perfected, without equal anywhere on the planet." So ultimately, he puts the blame on the Kremlin.
Yeah, like you can see that their army might not be as powerful as we think it is, but they have tools that can divide us,
right?
And they have nuclear weapons, and that makes them scary.
That's it.
And you have a fucking crazy man running the show, so you never know what's going to happen. All right, you want to get into the scorecard, Mike?
Let's do it. I'm just going to put a spoiler out there. This is a high number for me. This is going to be a good one. This is a high number. So we talked action. It was
I had to recalculate your total because you did the math wrong. So.
Dude, I'm always doing the math wrong. All right, well, that's why I need a doctor. We need the doctor of the podcast. Here's the math I didn't do wrong. 10 out of 10 on action. Absolutely nothing else is deserved. You have to go perfect 10. This novella is nonstop.
Yeah, no, I concurrently agree. I agree with you. It, like I said, it's compact and it's just a thrill ride. We hop on the roller coaster and it's like we go up and we go down and we just keep going down. It's like, doing loops to loops. It's I action has to be a 10.
Yep. Plot, also wanted to go 10 out of 10, but I agree with you with that small detail in the ending. I'm not sure everything is wrapped up as nicely as I'd like with a bow, so 9 out of 10. Great plot, bought into the story. 5 out of 5 in buy-in. You can't put this thing down. I think we both agreed on that.
Yeah, no, I went the exact same. I think that the plot is very good, engaging, almost as much as the action. And I did not believe anything in this story, and I feel like it's definitely something that could have happened.
Right.
I buy it more than the fact that a president could be a Russian mole.
Yeah. Maybe though, with buy-in being a novella, obviously you're going to have the reader's attention. It's very different than like a Brad Thor novel, which sometimes it could get dry, or you feel yourself maybe losing interest here and there, just because they're so long. I feel like a 5 out of 5 on novella is probably going to happen most of the time. It's got to keep your attention.
You would hope so, because right, this is normally what, 1/3 of a book, 1/4 of a book,
less.
This is
even less.
So it was 130 pages, 120 pages. So yeah, most of these are like 400 to 500. Yeah, so probably like a 4th, 5th. So it's got to be engaging.
Yeah. All right, tell me about the good guys, bad guys.
All right, so the bad guys, I found the Russians compelling, and I found the mob compelling. The descriptions of the mob, and just describing their actions, what they do. I thought also, the Russians were I like the nuance we get with each one. Just a little bit of discrepancies between each one. They're distinct characters. He actually tries to flesh them out as people, not just this entity. The good guys, I mean, was there really any good guys in the story? There's her friend who's kind of a dick. There's Wilson. I guess he's probably the thing that rises the most.
Mm-hmm.
Is Officer Wilson, who dies.
Yep.
But the senator's is a piece of shit. Some of the other aides are just lacking. Yeah, and there's not really any other person that Hayley interacts with besides Wilde. So I went low. I went with the 2, but maybe that's unfair. I don't know.
I went with a 3 just because Hayley Chill is super Hayley Chill here. And then also
yeah,
Officer
almost
Gomes.
like I kind of take her out of good guys because
True.
she is a constant, and I'm always going to like her. But no, I see what you mean.
That's like grading Mitch Rapp, right? Oh, what are we going to give Mitch Rapp in this book? Duh, he's Mitch Rapp.
Well, it's like someone on Instagram said, "Why do you guys never give the winner to Mitch Rapp?" And I'm like, well, because he's technically the winner of every book, right?
All the time.
That's
right.
no fun
Right.
to do that. It's fun to pick out something else in the story that rises to the occasion.
Yeah. I went 3 out of 5 on good guys because of the officer who gave his life. I thought he represented a lot of the good guys in real life, and making the sacrifice he did. Setting 5 out of 5, we talked about it.
I already said that. Yeah.
I got to read this other quote, though, because we talked a lot about the setting of D.C. at large. But listen to this. I just found about the rotunda. Even when we're inside the Capitol, listen to the detail we're getting. Hayley makes her stand in the small Senate rotunda on the south side of the ornamental air shaft ringed with 16 Benjamin Henry Latrobe designed marble columns. As the mob rushes blindly toward her, they don't know their way around the Capitol building. It's been apparent from the earliest moments of breaching the building. Just the corridors and the movement, and Benjamin Henry Latrobe designed the marble columns. And I think at another point they bring up the apotheosis of Washington inside the rotunda dome, the mural. I thought just inside the building, outside the building, everything's done well. And then to see Hayley at the embassy on a bus stop that I literally drive past every day, 5 out of 5 on the setting.
Yeah. I already said it. It's got to be a 5 out of 5. All right, what do you think about these covers, Mike? They're kind of reminiscent of Savage, a little bit of Savage Road, a little bit of Storm Rising. Is this what he was saying when he wanted everything to look similar? Like, because I feel like the main one looks very similar to the Storm Rising cover.
I don't know, but this first one is so cool.
It's
and
very cool.
On a color Kindle screen, it just pops.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Honestly, I think it's up there with Deep State.
It's very good.
The fact that the flag,
this wooden flag, is that a wooden ish flag? I don't know. It's got like some texture to it,
and it almost looks blurry, like you're speeding past it because of everything in the story going so fast. And then the little nugget of the Capitol building forming the inside of the letter A. I just love it. You know how a lot of covers in thrillers will have the flag? This is one of my favorite uses of the flag. The way it's blurred out just to create the speed and the chaos of that day.
Yeah, no, definitely. This cover conveys that this is going to be a propulsive read. Once you pick it up, you're not going to want to put it down.
And on the second version, I don't know where this one came out. It's probably the UK version. I think it's pretty cool. And what makes it is the red dress.
Yeah.
The red dress pops out against the black and white backdrop of the mob. I think that's just a super cool little detail.
I wonder, what is that picture from? Or is that just an artist's rendition of a mob in front of the White House? Or is that
it does actually look like a photograph.
Photograph from the day,
I don't know. That would be bold.
Yeah, it would be super bold. Yeah, it's like a similar style to, I think, what we said last time, where I believe this sort of cut-up thing has been done for a lot of different movie covers. I like it. It's cool. I'm going with a 4. It's a solid covers. Nothing like blows my socks off, but they're pretty good.
See, they do blow my socks off. So I'm going 4.5. I'm going to use the half card if you would allow me.
I'll allow it.
Okay. Free Space, what's your winner? What's your big 5 out of 5 winner for the book?
So I guess if we didn't have setting, it would be setting. I just think that, I guess to pull like a easy one is just the bridging that he does, the perfect placement in between the two stories, and his ability to get us up to speed quickly, intertwine elements of Savage and Deep State, while also, obviously we got this before Storm Rising, so we're getting hints like for what is set. Like at the very end, we find out that she's going to that MMA camp. We know that she's going to take some time off, that she is thinking about her father, and that the suicide at the end of Savage Road is, on her mind. So, yeah, I just liked how he perfectly placed this in between the two novels, as well as bringing in a real life story and intertwining it with Hayley's mission. And I think he just executed that greatly. So I'm going to give it to execution. That's going to be my free space.
I'm going to give the 5 out of 5 to Dan Conaway.
Okay. Oh, he's the at the very end acknowledgement, right?
Yeah, I have no idea who Dan Conaway is, but Chris writes, I would like to thank Dan Conaway for sparking the notion of writing a Hayley Chill novella. Yes. Yes, yes,
Thank you, Dan.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan.
The 5 out of 5 is this book was written. What a brilliant idea to do a little, as he says here, interstitial, a story between the stories to keep us going. And whoever had the idea to place it on January 6th, I don't think there's one thriller or movie character I want to see more in the crowd on January 6th than Hayley Chill. I just absolutely love that. Great choice, great decision. 5 out of 5 to Dan and Chris for bravely and boldly thinking of and writing the story.
Yes, thank you. See, Rap would just go home. He'd be like, "This is dumb. Call me when there's someone to kill." He'd have to know ahead of time that there's Russians in the building. Then he would go in, but he wouldn't just be there for no other reason.
Well, she's also unassuming. She's unassuming. She can blend in with the crowd. She's from West Virginia, so she needs to make it look like she's part of that. She'll be unassuming to the Russians. If she stumbles upon them, they'll think she's a nobody, swat her out of the way. I feel like she is just that level of talent, but also the ability to blend in that, Scott Harvath isn't going to have. Scott Coleman isn't going to have. A jacked up Mitch Rapp in this situation. He's better off in the Middle East. He's going to look too dark for this crowd, if I'm being honest with you. Hayley Chill is just the perfect person to be there.
Yeah, definitely. Especially being from West Virginia, being from West Virginia, the way she looks. Yeah. That's great. So I give it a 44, Mike. What did you give it?
That comes out to a 45.5. I think it's justified. It earns that. That might be the highest score we've given on the Thriller Pod scorecard, and
I think so.
I'm down for it. I'm here for it.
I think that's very good. All right, well that was Insurrection Day, man. Little short pod for a little short book. I like it. Little novella of a pod. As we said at the top, we have a whole host of content coming to you in the next couple weeks. Be on the lookout for that both on this feed, No Limits, the Thriller Podcast, as well as on our other feed, No Limits, the Scott Hardbath Podcast. We're going to be updating those constantly next couple months. So yeah, just stay tuned. Again, we need to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com. Or we have new Twitter and Instagram handles, don't we, Mike?
Yes, we do. At Thriller Podcast.
We are at Thriller Podcast on both those. And as always, trust no one.